Hello and welcome, hope you're all doing well. We are back in the PMDG 737-800 for another video in Microsoft Flight Simulator. And today we're going to be demonstrating how we take off using the bump thrust N1 profile from a really short runway here in Santos Dumont, Rio de Janeiro. So as you can see, we're lined up on runway 20 left, which is only 4,341 feet long, so yeah, not much tarmac at all to get us off the ground, but thankfully there are a couple of settings we can use to get airborne a little bit more quickly. And if we just hop over to the FMC to our perf init page, you can see we've got 6.1 tonnes of fuel, zero fuel weight of 56.4, and our reserves are 2.8 tonnes. And if we hit our N1 limit page, I'm going to start off by setting us up for our regular takeoff, just so you can see the difference and how the aeroplane reacts on a short runway. So we'll go flaps 5 as normal, and we'll load in our centre of gravity, and our V speeds are 134, 135 and 145 for V2. Now what I'm actually going to do is we're going to attempt a takeoff with those settings, and I'm actually going to perform a rejected takeoff, so we're getting a bit of a bonus tutorial as well, just so it illustrates how and why we'd need to use the bump thrust profile. Okay, auto brake set to RTO then, as we are actually going to perform a rejected takeoff. And let's also head down and set our trim for takeoff, which was 4.87. So we'll just wind that in now, just roughly to 4.87, and we'll also set our flaps to 5 for this particular takeoff. There we go, flaps 5. Right, so we're about ready for our first attempt at taking off then, so let's take a closer look at our engine display. And if I just zoom in there, we can see we've got the takeoff 1 profile selected, giving us an N1 of 95.6%. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the thrust to about 40%, and we're going to hold it on the brakes. So we'll just hold that, and we're going to go toga, still holding it on the brakes, and brakes released, and downward nose wheel pressure on our yoke. And that's 80 knots, and we're already halfway down the runway and nowhere near our V1 speed, so we'll go thrust idle, and we have rejected the takeoff. Auto brakes kicking in nicely, and we're already right at the end of the touchdown zone at the opposite end of the runway. So that was really just to illustrate how we're going to need a little bit more thrust and lift to get us away safely. Okay, so let's exit here and we'll taxi round, and we'll get ourselves configured for the bump thrust takeoff. So bump thrust is a rating that essentially allows us to eke a little bit more power out of the engines. In fact, it allows us to go over 100% N1. So as we just saw there, we were taking off about 95.6%. So it's not particularly kind on the engines, but it's a lot kinder than overshooting the runway and ending up in the drink. So I think we'll speed up the time now just while we taxi back, and we'll catch up again when we're lined up on the runway for our second pass. Okay, so here we are again then, just lining up on runway 20 left. That should do nicely, so we'll bring it to a stop there. And I also forgot to mention on our first attempt, we need to clear Sugarloaf Mountain, which is directly in front of us, so that should be fun as well. Okay, for our second attempt then, we're going to be taking off with flaps 25, so let's add in flaps 25 to our takeoff ref, and that's going to delete all our takeoff speeds. That's fine. In fact, if we go into our N1 limit again, in our current D-rated takeoff profile we've got 95.6% N1, so if we come down to hit the bump thrust profile, that jumps it up to 102.1% N1, so that's going to give us the extra thrust we need, and flaps 25 is going to give us the extra lift we need. and as you can see it also gives us much lower V speeds. We've got 126, 127 and 138 for the V2. Okay, that is pretty much everything set for our takeoff ref then. We just need to pop our auto brakes back onto RTO for takeoff, so that's set. And let's also reset our trim, which needs to be 3.28 for takeoff, so we'll just wind that back. Okay, and we also need to set flaps 25, so let's just come over here so we can see, and we'll just set that to flaps 25. One more. There we go, that's flaps 25 set. And if we also take a quick hop outside, we can watch our flaps moving into position. Really great sounds and animations there as well. Gotta love that. Okay, so that's our flaps all set. Okay, so we're all set and ready to go then. Let's have a closer look at the engine display, and we can see the bump thrust rating is activated, giving us an N1 of 102.1%. And exactly the same as we did on our last attempt, I'm going to go 40% on our thrust and keeping it held on the brakes. And again we're going to pop some downward nose wheel pressure on the yoke, and we'll go toga, still holding it on the brakes, and brakes released. Here we go. And that's 80 knots already. We're still in the touchdown zone. And V1 rotate. Look at that, plenty of room.
Positive rate of climb.
And positive rate, gear up. And auto brakes set off. And CMDA engaged. And gear lever to the neutral position. Okay, we are airborne. Christ almighty, that is a hell of a rate to climb, isn't it? That is seriously impressive, and it's actually taken me by surprise, as you can tell by my voice. That is giving it the beans, as they say. And if I just pan around with our drone camera as well, we can see we're already miles above Sugarloaf Mountain, which is crazy really. Look at this. That is stunning, isn't it? And I'm going to have to hop back inside and clean up the plane before we end up at the moon, I think. Right, let's start by winding the speed up a bit. We'll go to 179 knots and we'll go flaps 15. And speed 194. We'll go flaps 10. And speed 200 knots, and flaps 5, and we'll take the speed all the way up to 220 knots, I think. And flaps up, and VNAV engaged. Okay guys, there we have it, as Copacabana Beach drops away behind us. That concludes today's video on how we fly a bump thrust takeoff in the PMDG 737-800. I hope you found it useful, maybe you learned something new. If you did, give it a like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks very much for watching. Bye bye.